We're told in this week's Parsha of the Metzora of the individual suffering from an affliction that the commentators point out is brought on by sinful activities by the individual. And it's a fascinating period of time for the person. The person goes into isolation, and there are different offerings the person brings when the period of tsaras is ultimately over. And the Gemara teaches us that the sin which is most famously connected with the punishment of tsaras is lashon hara, speaking ill of other people. And if you look closely at the treatment while the person has tsaras and the process of bringing sacrifices after his tsaras is over, there are various connections with his interactions with people and being separated from people. And those all seem to speak to the concept of making the person think more about how he treats people and how he speaks about people. But there's another very interesting symbolism that comes up in different ways through the tsaras process, which is the issue of gava, the issue of haughtiness. The most famous, I think, example of haughtiness being symbolized through the tsaras process is at the end of the period of tsaras, there are offerings brought, and the blood from the offerings is sprinkled upon the individual who had tsaras, and the blood is held in a combination of wood from a cedar tree and from a hyssop tree. The Medrash says that cedar tree is known as being a tall and mighty tree, and hyssop is thought of as being a relatively simple tree. And the image is that this person has acted too much like a cedar and needs to act more like a hyssop and needs to be a person of greater humility. And I think it's an interesting thing to reflect on. Through this imagery and others like it, the Torah is teaching us that when we want to correct inappropriate activity, it's not only about the act. It's not only about thinking about repercussions of the act. It's about thinking about how I think and how I feel. The message seems to be that if a person would tell him or herself from today until tomorrow, no more lashon hara, no more lashon hara, no more lashon hara, it might be helpful. But truth be told, it's probably not enough. And not just to think about what I'm not going to say or what I'm not going to do, but to try to see the world through a different vantage point, to try to view other people in a more warm, compassionate, non-judgmental way. If I live my life with gava, with haughtiness, that means when I interact with people, all these thoughts and impressions float into my mind. I'm going to have a very hard time not sharing all those thoughts. The core is not to focus on what I'm not going to say, but to focus on how I'm not going to think and how I'm not going to feel, and more importantly, how I will think and feel, to see the beauty in each and every human being, to see the tselem elokim, the godliness in each and every soul. I think it carries with it a worthwhile thing to reflect on. In a broad sense, we need to understand that the way to improve ourselves in all kinds of aspects of life is not only to focus on the action, but to focus on the causes bringing me to the action. But specifically, we talk so much about not saying lashon hara, and then this hour I won't say lashon hara, and this time, and this person I won't say lashon hara about. But I think most of the time we focus on it as a prohibited activity. To really try to work on being a person of greater kindness, not only in action, but in how I look at you and how I look at him and how I look at her. The more charity with which I view people, the kinder I'll be towards them, and the kinder I'll be when I'm speaking about them, or maybe about them or maybe not about them. We have Rosh Chodesh Nisan this Shabbos. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, in a sense, is the most special month on the Jewish calendar, in a sense, because it's where it all began. It's the month of Nisan, of course, with the holiday of Pesach, is when the Jewish people are redeemed from Egypt. And more than being redeemed from Egypt, we took this remarkable spiritual catapult. We were this lowly slave nation, famous idea. We were on the lowest of levels of ritual and of spiritual impurity. And somehow, over a matter of weeks, God brought us to the point that we were ready to accept his holy Torah. Rosh Chodesh in general is a time for renewal. And Nisan in particular is a time, yes, to celebrate our spiritual freedom, but to also recognize our remarkable ability and potential to become completely different people. If that, we only work on it and we turn to God and ask him for his assistance, which he is so happy to benevolently share with us. May all of us have a wonderful month to come, a wonderful Pesach holiday, but may we tap into this ability to really renew and reinvigorate ourselves in every sense of the word. Have a wonderful Shabbos and a wonderful month.